Jake Morrison was having a normal Tuesday night. He was sitting on his old couch in his small apartment in Denver, eating cold pizza and watching a basketball game. The clock on the wall showed 11:30 at night. He had to work early the next morning, but he wanted to see the end of the game first. He never got to see who won. The lights in his apartment flickered once, twice, and then went completely dark. Jake cursed under his breath and stood up to check the fuse box. But before he could take a single step, he felt something strange. The air in the room became thick and heavy. His skin began to tingle like small needles were touching him everywhere. Then came the light. It was not like any light Jake had ever seen. It was blue and white, and so bright that he had to cover his eyes with his arm. He felt his body lifting off the ground. His feet left the carpet. He tried to scream, but no sound came from his throat. The next thing Jake knew, he was lying on a cold metal floor. The smell was strange, like copper and flowers mixed together. He opened his eyes slowly and saw a ceiling made of black metal with strange glowing lines running through it. This was not his apartment. This was not anywhere on Earth. Jake sat up quickly and looked around. He was in a small room with no windows. The walls were smooth and dark. There was no door that he could see. His heart was beating fast in his chest, and his hands were shaking. He had read stories about alien abductions when he was a kid. He had always thought they were fake. Now he was not so sure. A section of the wall suddenly slid open, and two figures walked in. Jake scrambled backward until his back hit the wall. The figures were tall, almost 7 feet, and they looked almost human. Almost. Their skin was pale white, like fresh snow. Their eyes were large and shifted colors between red and gold. And when they opened their mouths to speak to each other, Jake saw their teeth. Long, sharp fangs where their canine teeth should be. They grabbed Jake by his arms and pulled him to his feet. He tried to fight, but their grip was like iron. They were impossibly strong. They dragged him through long corridors filled with that same strange blue light. Jake saw other creatures moving around, all of them pale and beautiful and terrifying. Some of them stopped to look at him with hungry eyes. Finally, they brought him to a large room. It looked like a throne room from an old movie. At the far end, sitting on a chair made of something that looked like black crystal, was a woman. She was the most beautiful person Jake had ever seen, and also the most frightening. Her hair was silver and fell past her shoulders. Her eyes were deep red like blood. She wore a long black dress that seemed to move on its own. The guards forced Jake to his knees in front of her. The woman studied him for a long moment. Then she spoke. Her voice was cold and smooth, like ice sliding over glass. A small device near her throat glowed when she talked, and Jake heard her words in English. "So this is a human," she said. "I am Seraphina, High Matriarch of the Varth Empire. Do you know why you are here, creature?" Jake swallowed hard. His throat was dry. "No," he managed to say. "I don't know anything. I was just watching TV and then I was here." Seraphina smiled, and the sight of her fangs made Jake's blood run cold. "Your species has been watched by our scouts for many centuries. You are fascinating to us. You live on a dangerous planet. Your sun burns you. Your weather tries to kill you. Your own bodies fail you after only a few decades. And yet you survive. You grow. You spread across your world like insects." She stood up from her throne and walked toward him slowly. Her movements were graceful and predatory, like a cat stalking a mouse. "We are the Vorth," she continued. "We are an ancient race. We have existed for longer than your species has walked upright. We have conquered thousands of worlds. We feed on the life essence of other beings. Your people might call us vampires, though we are far more than your simple legends." Jake felt his whole body trembling. Vampires. Space vampires. He was going to die in space, killed by alien vampires. This was not how he thought his Tuesday would end. Serafina stopped in front of him and bent down so her face was close to his. He could smell her now, a scent like roses and something metallic underneath. Her red eyes looked into his brown ones. "Our scientists wish to study your kind," she said. "We want to know how long a human can last against our hunger. So we have designed a test for you." She straightened up and gestured to the guards. They pulled Jake to his feet again. "You will be placed in a sealed chamber," Serafina explained. "Inside that chamber will be 7 of our females. They've been denied feeding for over 1 standard galactic month. They are hungry, very hungry. We wish to see how long you survive before they drain every drop of life from your body." Jake's mind was racing. He was going to be locked in a room with 7 starving vampire women. This was a death sentence. There was no way he could survive. "Why?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Why me? Why any of this?" Serafina tilted her head slightly, as if his question amused her. "Because your species is known for its stubbornness. Other races we have tested simply gave up when faced with our kind. They sat down and waited to die. But humans, we have been told, are different. You fight even when there is no hope. We wish to see if this is true, or if it is simply a story." She waved her hand, and the guards began dragging Jake toward a side door. "If you survive until dawn by our ship's clock, you will be returned to your planet," Serafina called after him. "But no human has ever survived a night with the hungry. I do not expect you to be the first." Jake was pulled through more corridors. His mind was blank with fear. He thought about his family back home, his mom who called him every Sunday, his younger sister who was starting college next year. Would they ever know what happened to him? The guards stopped in front of a large circular door. One of them pressed a panel on the wall, and the door slid open with a hiss. The room beyond was dark. Jake could not see anything inside. They threw him in. Jake stumbled and fell to his knees on the cold floor. Behind him, the door sealed shut with a sound of finality that echoed in his chest. He was alone in the darkness. Or at least, he thought he was. Then he heard them. Soft sounds of movement coming from all around him. The whisper of fabric. The click of heels on metal. And underneath it all, a low sound that might have been breathing, or might have been growling. Jake slowly got to his feet and pressed his back against the sealed door. His eyes were starting to adjust to the dim light. And what he saw made his heart nearly stop. 7 women were emerging from the shadows. They were beautiful and terrible. Their skin was white as bone. Their eyes glowed in the darkness, some red, some gold, some shifting between the two. And all of them were looking at him with a hunger that was almost visible in the air. Jake Morrison, a normal guy from Denver who fixed computers for a living, was about to have the longest night of his life. If he lived to see the morning, it would be a miracle. But Jake had never been good at giving up. His father had taught him that when life knocked you down, you got back up. When the world said you could not do something, you proved it wrong. He did not know how he was going to survive this. He did not have a plan. He did not have a weapon. He had nothing but himself, but that would have to be enough. The darkness in the chamber was not complete. As Jake's eyes adjusted, he could see a faint glow coming from lines in the walls, the same blue light he had seen throughout the ship. It was just enough to see shapes and shadows. Just enough to see the 7 figures that were slowly closing in on him. Jake kept his back pressed against the sealed door. His breathing was fast and shallow. He could feel sweat forming on his forehead, even though the room was cold. Every instinct in his body was screaming at him to run, but there was nowhere to go. The first woman to fully emerge from the shadows was tall and elegant. She moved like water flowing over stone, smooth and graceful. Her hair was black and pulled back tightly from her face. Her eyes were a steady gold color, and they studied Jake with the calm patience of someone who had lived for a very long time. "I am Valeria," she said. Her voice was low and controlled. "I am the eldest among us. I wish you to know that what happens here is not personal. It is simply our nature." Jake did not respond. He was too busy watching the others. A second woman stepped forward. This one was different. Her hands were shaking, and her eyes kept shifting between red and gold rapidly. Her blonde hair was messy, and she looked less elegant than Valeria. She looked desperate. "Enough talking," this one said. Her voice was strained. "It has been too long. I need to feed. I need it now." Valeria held up a hand. "Patience, Nadia. We should observe him first. Learn his patterns." "I cannot wait," Nadia said. Her fangs were fully extended now, long and sharp and white. "His blood. I can smell it. It is so warm, so alive." Two more women appeared. They looked almost identical, twins with copper-colored hair and matching expressions of cruel amusement. They moved in perfect sync, circling around to Jake's left side. "Let Nadia have her fun," one of the twins said. "Yes, let her try," the other agreed. "We can watch and learn." Jake learned their names as they spoke to each other. The twins were Cordelia and Camille. There was also Celine, a quiet woman with sad silver eyes who hung back from the others. Ivy was the youngest looking, barely appearing older than 18, though Jake knew she was probably ancient. Her hunger was wild and uncontrolled, like a child who had missed too many meals. And then there was Morgana. She had dark brown hair and eyes that seemed more curious than hungry. She did not move toward Jake like the others. Instead, she sat on a raised platform near the back of the room and simply watched. Nadia could not hold back any longer. With a sound that was half scream and half growl, she launched herself at Jake. She moved so fast that she was almost a blur of white and gold. But Jake had grown up in a rough part of Denver. He had been in fights before. His body reacted before his mind could catch up. He dropped to the floor and rolled to the side. Nadia crashed into the door where he had been standing a moment before. The impact was so hard that it left a dent in the metal. Jake scrambled to his feet and ran to the other side of the room. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. That had been close. Too close. Nadia turned around slowly. There was a look of surprise on her pale face. "He moved," she said. "How did he move so fast?" "Interesting," Valeria murmured. She was watching Jake with new attention now. "The other humans we have taken could not move like that. They froze when we approached. Their fear made them helpless." Jake was breathing hard. "Yeah, well, I've had a lot of practice with things trying to kill me," he said. "Growing up where I did, you learn to dodge or you learn to bleed." Ivy giggled from somewhere in the shadows. It was not a nice sound. "I like him," she said. "He has spirit. It will make the feeding so much sweeter." The twins began to move again, circling around to cut off Jake's escape routes. He turned to keep them in his sight, but that meant his back was to Celine. He heard her approaching and spun around just in time to see her reaching for him. He ducked under her arm and pushed her away. It was like pushing a stone statue. She barely moved, but the surprise of his resistance made her stumble back. "His blood," Celine said, her voice shaking. "When I got close, the smell was so strong. Too strong. It burned my senses." Valeria frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean it was overwhelming. Like standing too close to a fire. I have never experienced anything like it." This was interesting information. Jake filed it away in his mind. There was something about his blood that bothered them. He did not understand why, but it might be useful. For the next hour, Jake played a deadly game of survival. The women took turns attacking him, sometimes alone, sometimes in pairs. He dodged and ducked and ran and rolled. He used the furniture in the room as barriers. He threw himself over low tables and slid under raised platforms. He got hit a few times. Cordelia managed to scratch his arm with her nails, leaving 4 thin lines of red. Ivy caught his shirt and tore it half off his body. Nadia got close enough to bite him once, but she pulled back almost immediately, coughing and gagging like she had swallowed something foul. "What is wrong with his blood?" Nadia screamed in frustration. "It tastes like poison." Jake was just as confused as she was, but he was not going to complain. Something about him was repelling them. His blood was doing something that their other victims' blood had not done. He did not know why, but he was going to use it. The attacks continued, but they became less frequent as time went on. The women seemed more cautious now, more hesitant. Every time one of them got close enough to taste his blood or smell it directly, they pulled back with looks of pain and confusion. During a break in the attacks, Morgana finally approached Jake. He tensed up, ready to run again. But she held up her hands in a peaceful gesture. "I am not going to attack you," she said. "At least, not yet. I want to understand something first." Jake watched her carefully. "Understand what?" "You," she said simply. "You are not like the other humans we have encountered. I have studied your species. I have read the reports from our scouts on your world. Most humans, when faced with danger they cannot overcome, they shut down. Their minds break. They give up. That's probably smart of them," Jake said. "Giving up when there's no hope." Morgana shook her head. "But you have not given up. You have no weapons. You have no special powers. You are weaker and slower than any of us. You must know that you cannot win. And yet you keep fighting. Why?" Jake thought about the question. His arm was bleeding. His body was covered in bruises. He was exhausted and terrified. Why was he still fighting? "Because that's what humans do," he finally said. "We don't know when to quit. It's probably our biggest flaw, but it's also the reason we're still around. Every time something tried to wipe us out, disease, war, natural disasters, we just kept going. We're too stubborn to know when we're beaten." Morgana studied him for a long moment. There was something in her eyes that looked almost like respect. "Fascinating," she said quietly from across the room. Valeria called out. "Morgana, stop talking to the prey. You will have your turn to feed eventually." Morgana turned away from Jake and walked back to her platform. But before she sat down, she looked over her shoulder at him. "Try to survive until dawn," she said softly. "I would like to talk to you again." Jake did not know what to make of that, but he did not have time to think about it. Nadia was getting hungry again, and her eyes were locked on him with a desperate intensity. The night was far from over, and Jake was running out of energy. But somewhere deep inside him, a small flame of hope was still burning. He had survived the first hours. Maybe, just maybe, he could survive the rest. He just had to keep moving, keep fighting, keep being human. It was all he knew how to do. 4 hours had passed since Jake had been thrown into the chamber. He knew this because he had been counting in his head, a trick he had learned during long nights working late shifts at the computer repair shop. Counting helped him stay focused. It gave his mind something to do besides panic. The attacks had slowed down. The Varith women were still hungry. Jake could see it in their eyes and hear it in their voices. But something was holding them back. Every time they got close to him, something happened that made them retreat. At first, Jake thought it was just his quick movements that threw them off. But he was starting to understand that it was more than that. During a quiet moment, Valeria gathered the other women to talk. Jake stayed on the far side of the room, catching his breath and watching them carefully. He could not hear everything they said, but he caught pieces of their conversation. His blood is not normal, Selene was saying. It is too rich, too intense. When I smell it, my head spins. It is like trying to drink lightning, Nadia added. She still looked angry about her failed feeding attempt. I have never tasted anything so overwhelming. It burned my tongue. It made my stomach twist. Ivy nodded quickly. I felt it too. When I got close, I could feel his fear and his anger and something else. Something that made my fangs ache. Jake listened carefully. His blood was different somehow. It was too strong for them to handle. He did not know why, but he was starting to form a theory. Earth was not an easy planet to live on. Humans had evolved in a world full of dangers. Wild animals that wanted to eat them. Diseases that killed millions. Weather that changed from burning heat to freezing cold. Other humans who wanted to take what they had. Every generation of humans had fought and struggled and survived against impossible odds. That kind of survival left marks. Human blood was full of chemicals that other species might not have. Adrenaline that flooded the body during danger. Cortisol from constant stress. Iron from a meat-based diet. All these things mixed together in Jake's veins, and apparently, it was too much for the delicate senses of the Varth. Jake smiled despite his exhaustion. Humanity was too spicy for space vampires. There was a joke in there somewhere, but he was too tired to find it. Cordelia noticed his smile and hissed at him. What are you grinning about, pray? Nothing, Jake said. Just thinking about how funny life can be. There is nothing funny about your situation, Camille said. You are still going to die in this room. Maybe, Jake admitted. But not as fast as you thought. And that's got to be annoying, right? The twins exchanged an irritated look. Jake's refusal to be afraid was clearly bothering them. They were used to prey that cowered and begged. His attitude was something new. Morgana approached him again. The other women watched her with curiosity, but did not try to stop her. Jake noticed that Morgana seemed to have a special status among them. The others respected her, or at least tolerated her strange behavior. You have figured something out, Morgana said. It was not a question. Jake nodded slowly. Your kind evolved as predators. You hunt beings that are weaker than you, beings that give up easily. But humans are different. We come from a world that tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. We're built for survival in ways that other species aren't. Go on, Morgana said. My blood is overwhelming to you because it's full of things that other species don't have. Stress hormones, fight-or-flight chemicals, whatever you want to call them. When you try to feed on me, it's like trying to drink from a fire hose. Too much, too fast, too intense. Morgana was silent for a moment. That is a clever theory, she finally said. And it may be correct. We have never encountered a species quite like yours. Most beings we feed upon have evolved in safer environments. They do not have the same chemical makeup that you do. So, what does that mean for me? Jake asked. Am I safe? No, Morgana said honestly. You are not safe. We are still hungry, and hunger will eventually overcome discomfort. But it means you have time. More time than any other human has ever had in this situation. Jake absorbed this information. He was not safe, but he had an advantage. It was not much, but it was something. The next few hours were a strange kind of standoff. The Varth women would occasionally make attempts to feed on Jake, but each time they pulled back. Nadia tried twice more and ended up dry heaving in the corner. Ivy made a quick lunge and immediately retreated with tears in her eyes. Even Valeria, the eldest and most disciplined, approached Jake once and then walked away shaking her head. During this time, Jake began to study his captors more carefully. He watched their patterns and behaviors. He noticed that Nadia's hunger peaked in regular cycles, about every 45 minutes. When she reached her peak, she became reckless and aggressive. But if he could avoid her during those peaks, she would retreat to recover. The twins always moved together, which created blind spots. If Jake positioned himself correctly, he could use one twin to block the other. Celine was the most hesitant of all. She seemed to feel guilty about hunting him. There was sadness in her silver eyes that Jake did not understand. She would approach him and then stop, looking at him with an expression that was almost apologetic. Ivy was young and impatient. She made mistakes when she was frustrated. If Jake could make her angry, she would act without thinking, and he could dodge her easily. Valeria was the most dangerous because she was calm and controlled. But her discipline also made her predictable. She always approached from the same angle. She always paused before striking. Jake could time her movements almost perfectly, and Morgana never attacked at all. She just watched. "Why don't you try to feed on me?" Jake asked her during another quiet moment. "Because I am curious," Morgana replied. "And I have learned that curiosity is sometimes more satisfying than hunger." "Curious about what?" "About you. About your species. About what makes you so different." Morgana leaned forward slightly. "I have lived for over 2,000 of your years. I have fed on hundreds of species across dozens of worlds. But I have never encountered anything like you. A being that refuses to accept death. A being that fights against impossible odds simply because fighting is in its nature." Jake shrugged. "That's just how humans are. We're too dumb to know when to quit." "No," Morgana said. "It is not stupidity. I have seen stupidity many times. This is something else. This is a kind of madness, perhaps. But it is a glorious madness. A madness that has allowed your species to conquer your own planet and reach toward the stars." She paused, her shifting eyes fixed on his face. "The Varth have existed for far longer than humanity. We have conquered countless worlds and drained countless civilizations. We believed ourselves to be the ultimate predators. But looking at you, I wonder if we have been wrong. Perhaps the ultimate predator is not the one who kills the most. Perhaps it is the one who simply refuses to die." Jake did not know how to respond to that. He was just a computer repair guy from Denver. He was not a philosopher or a warrior. He was just a man trying to survive 1 minute at a time. But Morgana's words stuck with him. Maybe that was the human advantage. Not strength. Not speed. Not weapons or technology. Just pure, stubborn refusal to give up. The absolute insistence on continuing to exist, no matter what the universe threw at them. It had kept humanity alive through ice ages and plagues and wars. Maybe it could keep Jake alive through one night with 7 vampire women. The hours continued to pass. Jake's body was screaming for rest. His muscles ached. His scratches burned. His eyes wanted to close. But he forced himself to stay alert. He forced himself to keep moving when they attacked and keep watching when they rested. Somewhere beyond the walls of this chamber, dawn was approaching. Jake did not know if the Varth would keep their promise to release him. But he knew one thing for certain. He was going to survive this night. Not because he was special. Not because he was powerful. But because he was human. And humans did not know how to quit. 8 hours had passed. Jake was running on nothing but willpower and fear. His body had moved beyond exhaustion into a strange kind of numbness. His arms felt like they were made of lead. His legs trembled with every step. His vision would blur sometimes, and he had to blink hard to clear it. But he was still standing. That was more than anyone had expected. The Varth women were suffering too, though in a different way. Their hunger had become a physical pain that Jake could almost see on their faces. Nadia was curled up against the wall, clutching her stomach and making small sounds of distress. Ivy was pacing back and forth like a caged animal, her eyes wild and unfocused. Even Valeria, always so calm and controlled, was showing cracks in her composure. Her hands shook slightly, and her perfect posture had started to slump. The constant exposure to Jake's overwhelming blood scent had done something to them. It was like being very hungry and standing in front of a meal that burned your mouth every time you tried to eat it. The need was there, but the ability to satisfy it was not. It was driving them mad. Celine was the first to break completely. She had been quiet for most of the night, hanging back from the attacks and watching with those sad silver eyes. But now she collapsed against the wall next to where Jake was resting. Her pale hands covered her face and her shoulders shook. "I cannot do this anymore," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "The smell of him. It is everywhere. It fills my head. It burns my senses. I feel like I'm standing next to a sun that I cannot look away from." Jake watched her carefully, ready to move if this was a trick. But it did not seem like a trick. Selene looked genuinely broken. "Why do you do this?" Jake asked her. "Why do you hunt and feed on other beings?" Selene lowered her hands and looked at him with those silver eyes. "Because we must," she said. "It is our nature. We cannot survive on food or water like you do. We need life essence. Without it, we wither and fade. It is not a choice. It is simply what we are. But you feel bad about it," Jake said. "I can see it in your face. You don't like killing." "No," Selene admitted. "I do not. But liking and needing are different things. I need to feed. I do not need to enjoy it." Jake nodded slowly. In a strange way, he understood. Humans ate meat. They hunted animals for food. Most people did not enjoy the killing part, but they did it anyway because they needed to survive. The Varth were just doing the same thing on a much larger scale. That did not make it right, but it made it understandable. One by one, the other women began to falter. The twins had stopped moving in their perfect synchronization. Cordelia was sitting on the floor with her eyes closed, and Camille was leaning against her sister for support. Nadia had stopped making sounds altogether and was lying still, though Jake could see her chest rising and falling. Ivy had finally stopped pacing. She had found a dark corner and curled up in it like a child. Every few minutes, she would whimper softly. Only Valeria and Morgana remained functional, though even they looked strained. Valeria was standing near the center of the room, her golden eyes moving back and forth between Jake and her sisters. She looked like a general whose army was falling apart around her. "This was supposed to be simple," Valeria said. Her voice was tight with frustration. "A human. A single weak mortal human. We should have drained him in minutes. Hours at most. But we did not," Morgana said calmly. She was still sitting on her raised platform, watching everything with those curious eyes. "And now we must face the truth of what that means." "What truth?" Valeria demanded. "The truth that humans are not prey," Morgana said. "They are something else entirely. Something we have never encountered before." Jake saw his opportunity. He was exhausted and hurt and scared, but his mind was still working. The women were weak and confused. If he could push them a little further, if he could make them see the truth, maybe he could survive this without anyone dying. He pushed himself up from the floor and walked toward Morgana. His legs felt like they might give out at any moment, but he kept them steady through sheer force of will. "She's right," Jake said. "I'm not prey, and neither are the rest of my species." Valeria hissed at him, but she did not move to attack. She was too tired. They all were. "You've been watching Earth for centuries," Jake continued. "You've seen what we do. We fight everything. We fight each other. We fight nature. We fight diseases. We fight gods and monsters and anything else that tries to stop us. That's not what prey does. That's what predators do." "You are not predators," Valeria said, but her voice lacked conviction. Maybe not in the way you think of predators, Jake agreed. We're not the fastest or the strongest. We don't have fangs or claws or special powers. But we have something else. We have stubbornness so deep it's coded into our DNA. We have a survival instinct that doesn't know when to turn off. We have the ability to keep going long after any reasonable creature would have given up. He looked at each of the women in turn. You tried to feed on me tonight. 7 of you against 1 of me. And here I am, still standing. Not because I'm special, but because I'm human. And humans don't quit. We don't surrender. We don't accept death, even when it's staring us in the face. Morgana stood up from her platform and walked toward Jake. The other women watched her with exhausted eyes. You have proven something tonight, Morgana said to him. Something that the High Council did not expect. Something that changes everything. What's that? Jake asked. You have proven that humans are too dangerous to consume, Morgana said. Your blood is incompatible with our biology. But more than that, your spirit is incompatible with submission. If the Vorath Empire were to try to harvest your species, we would not find easy prey. We would find warriors. Billions of warriors who would fight us to the last breath. She turned to face her sisters. We have to tell the Council, Morgana said. We have to tell them what we have learned here. Humanity is not a food source. Humanity is a threat. Perhaps the greatest threat the Empire has ever faced. Valeria stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. You are right, she said. I did not want to admit it. But you are right. This human has defeated us. Not with strength or weapons, but with something else entirely. Something we do not understand. Jake let out a long breath he did not know he had been holding. He was still alive. And more than that, he had done something important. He had shown these ancient beings what humanity was truly made of. So what happens now? He asked. Now we wait for dawn, Morgana said. And when the doors open, we tell the High Matriarch what we have learned. That the experiment was a failure, but in a way she did not expect. We could not feed on you because you are not prey. You are something new. Something that the Vorath have never faced before. Jake nodded slowly. He was so tired he could barely keep his eyes open. But he allowed himself a small smile. He had survived the night, not by being strong, not by being fast, not by being clever, just by being human. And for the first time since he had been taken from his apartment, Jake thought that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. The hours until dawn would be long. But Jake had made it this far. He could make it a little further. He sat down against the wall, keeping his eyes on the women around him. But there was no more danger in their gazes. Only exhaustion and something that might have been respect. Humanity had passed the test. Now, they just had to wait for the sunrise. The sound of the door opening woke Jake from a half-sleep he had not meant to fall into. He jerked upright, his body protesting with a chorus of aches and pains. For a moment, he did not remember where he was. Then it all came flooding back, the abduction, the chamber, the 7 vampire women. The long night of survival. Bright light poured into the room from the open doorway. Jake squinted against it, his eyes adjusting slowly after hours in the dim chamber. He saw figures moving toward him, shapes that resolved into the forms of Vorath guards. And behind them, the High Matriarch Seraphina. Seraphine's face was unreadable as she entered the chamber. Her red eyes swept across the scene, taking in the exhausted forms of the 7 women and the battered but still breathing human in the center. Well, Seraphina said. Her voice was cold and flat. This is unexpected. Valeria stepped forward. She had regained some of her composure, though she still looked tired. High Matriarch, she said, bowing her head slightly. The experiment did not go as planned. I can see that, Serafina replied. The human was supposed to be drained within hours. Instead, 12 hours have passed, and he still lives. Explain. Before Valeria could speak, Morgana stepped forward. I will explain, High Matriarch. With your permission. Serafina raised one elegant eyebrow but nodded. Speak. Morgana took a deep breath. The human cannot be consumed. His blood is incompatible with our biology. When we attempted to feed, we experienced pain and disorientation. His blood is too rich, too intense, too full of chemicals that our bodies cannot process. Every attempt to drain him resulted in failure. Impossible, Serafina said. We have fed on countless species. None have ever been immune to our hunger. That is true, Morgana agreed. But humans are not immune. They are something worse. They are poisonous to us. Not in a way that kills, but in a way that prevents feeding entirely. Their blood overwhelms our senses. It is like trying to drink fire. Serafina was silent for a long moment. Her eyes moved to Jake, who was still sitting on the floor, watching the exchange with tired but alert eyes. And what of the human himself? Serafina asked. Did he submit? Did he beg for mercy? It was Valeria who answered this time. No, High Matriarch. He did not. He fought us for every minute of the night. He dodged our attacks. He resisted our influence. He never stopped moving, never stopped fighting until the very end. We offered him many chances to surrender, Celine added quietly. He refused everyone. Serafina studied Jake with new interest. Is this true, human? You never considered giving up? Jake pushed himself to his feet. His legs were shaky, but he forced himself to stand straight. He was not going to face this ancient being from the floor like a beaten dog. Where I come from, Jake said, giving up is not an option. You fight until you win or you fight until you die. There is no in-between. And if death was certain? Serafina asked. If there was no hope at all? Then you die fighting, Jake said simply. That's the human way. Always has been. Always will be. Serafina was quiet for a long time. The chamber was silent, except for the soft sounds of the exhausted women and the hum of the ship's systems. Finally, the High Matriarch spoke again. I have lived for 10,000 of your years. I have seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. I have watched empires born and die. I have fed on species that no longer exist in this galaxy. And in all that time, I have never encountered anything like you. She took a step closer to Jake, her red eyes boring into his. Your species is young. You have only just begun to reach beyond your own world. By our standards, you are infants. And yet, you have done something tonight that no other species has ever done. You have defeated the hunger of the Varth. Not with weapons or technology, but with pure, stubborn will to survive. Jake did not know what to say, so he said nothing. Serafina turned to address the guards. Return the human to his planet. Erase his memories of this place, as is standard protocol. She paused. And add his species to the forbiddance list. A murmur went through the assembled Varth. Even the exhausted women in the chamber looked up with surprise. The forbiddance list? High Matriarch? One of the guards asked. Yes, the list of species that are not to be harvested under any circumstances. Humanity will be classified as follows. Toxic, aggressive, unpredictable, not worth the cost. Serafina looked at Jake one more time. Go home, human, and know that you have saved your species tonight, though you will not remember it. Jake felt the guards taking his arms. They were gentler than before. Everything was happening very fast now. He was being led out of the chamber, down the long corridors, back toward wherever they had brought him in. Before he was out of sight, he turned his head and saw Morgana watching him. She raised one pale hand in a gesture that might have been a wave or a salute. Then the door closed, and she was gone. The next thing Jake knew, he was waking up in his apartment. He was on the floor next to his couch. The TV was still on, showing static where the basketball game should have been. The clock on the wall showed 3 in the afternoon. He felt like he had been hit by a truck. Every muscle in his body ached, but he could not remember why. He sat up slowly and looked around. Everything seemed normal. His pizza was still on the coffee table, though it looked like it had been sitting out for a while. His phone was on the couch, showing 17 missed calls from his mother. Jake rubbed his eyes. He must have fallen asleep watching the game. Weird. He could not remember the game at all. Actually, he could not remember much about last night. There was a vague feeling of something important, something dangerous. But when he tried to focus on it, it slipped away like water through his fingers. He shrugged and got up to take a shower. Whatever had happened, it was over now. He had a normal life to get back to. 300 years later, the first human ships reached the edges of Varith space. The galaxy had expected conflict. The Varith Empire was known for its aggression, for its hunger, for its willingness to destroy any species that stood in its way. And humanity was known for its own brand of chaos, a species that had somehow clawed its way from a single planet to a vast interstellar civilization in a shockingly short time. But there was no conflict. Instead, there was a message from the High Council of the Varith. A message of greeting, of respect, of a desire for peaceful relations. The human diplomats were surprised. They had prepared for war. They had not prepared for peace. Deep in the archives of the High Council, there was a file that explained everything. A file that described an experiment conducted centuries ago. An experiment that had failed in the most unexpected way possible. The file contained recordings of a single human male who had survived a night in a chamber with 7 starving Varith females. It contained analyses of human blood chemistry and its effects on Varith biology. It contained testimony from the women involved, describing how the human had refused to give up, had refused to submit, had refused to die. And at the end of the file, there was a notation added by the High Matriarch herself. It read, "This species is not to be touched. They are not prey. They are not food. They are something else entirely. They are survivors in the truest sense of the word. To attempt to harvest them would be to invite destruction upon ourselves. Leave them alone. Let them grow. Let them spread across the stars. And pray that they never decide to turn their stubbornness against us." The notation was signed by Seraphina, who still ruled the Empire 300 years later, and the species she was writing about. They never knew. Jake Morrison had lived out the rest of his life in peaceful ignorance, fixing computers in Denver and never remembering the night he had saved humanity. But that was okay, because that was the human way too. They did not need to be remembered. They did not need to be celebrated. They just needed to survive, and survive they did. They always did.